Okay, thank you, Denise, for setting this up and getting this going. And I'm joined today by Jordan Smith, who's a current fellow. Hi, Jordan. And what we're going to do today is we're going to tell you about the National Nuclear Security Administration's Graduate Fellowship Program. That's a lot of words, a lot of acronyms. But if you want to work in government, you're going to have to deal with a lot of acronyms. My name is Warren Cordes. I work for PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and I'm actually presenting this on behalf of NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration. And it's probably a good idea to figure out what that is, actually, right? I don't know how many of you have, and most of you are cloaked, so I can't see you if you raise your hands, but I don't know how many of you have seen Oppenheimer. Maybe raise a digital hand if you're not. Oppenheimer is it's a pretty interesting movie. But what it depicts basically is the United States effort to build atomic weapons, actually two different atomic weapons, during World War II. As it turns out, physics has declared that there are two paths to the bomb. One is your enriched uranium, and the other is plutonium. And we took both of those paths, and were successful on both of those paths. And really what that required was an enormous engineering, really kind of facility building effort from scratch. And this map shows you where some of those facilities are. And the movie does a pretty good job of at least giving you the glimpse into the Los Alamos part of that. By the way, and I'll just pause for a moment. You notice the big dot up where it says Hanford. That is the approximate location of PNNL. We'll refer to that later again in a minute. But at the end of the war, so 1946, it was decided that this infrastructure that was created during World War II should be in civilian hands. And so not long after the war, the Atomic Energy Commission was created. It oversaw this infrastructure until the late 1970s, when the Department of Energy was created. It sort of inherited all of this. And then in 2000, NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration, was sort of carved out of DOE to oversee specifically this infrastructure. And as you can see here, NNSA's mission is, I like to think of the top line there that you're looking at as sort of the inward-facing mission, right? So NNSA has responsibility to oversee the stockpile, that is fissile material everywhere, but also the manufacturing techniques and equipment, and on that top line, oversight of sort of programmatically and scientifically and technologically oversight of all of that, right? And on the bottom line, you can see what I would call sort of the outward-facing mission. So there is a counterterrorism and counterproliferation mission. You might have heard of NEST teams. Anybody heard of those? No? Anybody seen the cheesy movie Broken Arrow, starring John Travolta? No? See, already I've come up with two movie recommendations. Later I'll have some book recommendations too. But so there are teams at NNSA that have a responsibility to respond to lost nuclear weapons or nuclear, radiological or nuclear incidents anywhere in the world, really. That's not sort of, I would say, the largest mission that NNSA have. Probably the bottom right for your interests and concerns probably is the big thing, and that is a non-proliferation mission. And of course that deals with policy, it deals with education, training, it deals with a wide variety of things. Let me pause for a moment and see if there's a question yet about anything so far that we've talked about. Okay. So this fellowship program. So my mission is on the left. My mission is to go out and find really sharp grad students with an interest in working in the nuclear sector or national security sector. And by and large, this, if you look all the way to the right, this program that we've been doing now for 20 years or so has been very successful in doing that. We've identified a lot of folks, the vast majority of whom stay in this line of business even after they leave the fellowship program. Your interest probably should be in column number 2 on the assignment scene. So this is a 1-year full-time salaried position, this fellowship program. There are just north of 70 positions available per year. And there's an opportunity to really have some impact. So this is not an internship, right? This is a fellowship. This is real world, real work, an opportunity to do real things and have real impact. We are seeking people from diverse backgrounds and in every way, shape, and form. And in the program and NNSA value this diversity and believe that it leads to the success of the organization. And just to sort of highlight even academic diversity, I'm going to show you the pie chart there shows the academic background of our the current fellows class. So you can see about 54% policy folks, about a third technical, and a smattering of others. I have taken the liberty of doing a word cloud with the grad programs that the current fellows are in. And so you can see that in the bottom right here. My personal favorites are philosophy and theology. And in past classes, we've had musicians, music majors, basically, right? So there's a long way of saying whatever program you're engaged in your grad studies right now, don't let it dissuade you from applying because like there's a diversity of folks in there. So here are the offices that are available. And there's basically all the ones in color except for one. This chart actually needs to be corrected, but are in NNSA. So anything that begins with NA is an NNSA office. And we have two fellowship positions, or two places where fellows are placed that are not in NNSA. You can see there on the top left, DOEIN, that's Department of Energy, Intelligence, and Counterintelligence, and Department of State. Actually, the one right under DOEIN, you'll notice it's Department of Commerce. That probably should be gray also. But you can see there are the NNSA offices, and you could probably figure out, depending on what your specialty is, if you're a policy, international relations, that sort of type person, you can probably figure out that you might wind up in NA20, you might wind up, but there are other places too, you might wind up NACI, Congressional Affairs. There are actually a variety of places where you could probably land. But basically that gives you an idea of where the sort of the positions are that are available to our fellows. Notice there the NNSA field offices on the right side, right above the Department of State. So those are located across the country, mostly, and there's probably some reason for this that I don't know, but mostly south of 39 degrees north latitude for some reason. And but we do have, NNSA has facilities in Tennessee, South Carolina, Texas, New Mexico, California, and Nevada. And so these positions, I would say, probably tend to be a little more STEM oriented, but not certainly not 100%. I've talked to fellows who have, for example, worked out of one of the two New Mexico sites, either Sandia or Los Alamos, who were communications specialists, and they were doing the sort of the communications portfolio for the lab there. So let me pause here again and see if there are any questions about anything so far. No? Good. All right. So this is an opportunity to gain real world experience and to, sort of launch your career in the government. There's opportunity for travel, and I'll let Jordan speak to that in just a second, and to do really a wide variety of things. So the fellowship course starts with an orientation, should you be accepted, and in summer of, this one will start in the summer of 25 in June, with a 1-week orientation at PNNL campus in Richland. That's where that big dot was, the Hanford reactor that I showed you. PNNL's right next to that. And during that week, you have a chance, basically you're onboarding as a PNNL employee, and so you have the opportunity to go through all of that, but also to meet your the other fellows in the program and to start with virtual introductions with your NNSA offices. There is an Aspiring Leader program in which you can receive that's a certificate program. If you view your future in government as a leader in government, this is a good opportunity to head down that path. You'll have the opportunity to shadow, to take specialized courses, and to see if that's maybe even something that interests you long term. There are a number of career development events during the fellowship, including hiring seminars, and help with resume writing, and career fair. And then at the end of the year, there's a closing event, closing ceremony in Washington, D.C., with a reception, and one of the NNSA leaders will be there as well. So here are some recent highlights of what some recent fellows have done, but I'm going to pause here and let Jordan talk about it because she's a current fellow and has current experience, and then you probably want to ask her a ton of questions. Jordan.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. Hi everyone. I've actually met some people online before, so it's good to see you guys again. I am currently in the Office of Nonproliferation Policy, which sits under that Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation bubble that you saw. And I've worked on a variety of projects since starting my fellowship, but I think probably, related to this page, I'll start out with a few of my coolest experiences. I was able to travel overseas and go to Vienna, Austria in October, where I attended an International Atomic Energy Agency conference on climate change and the role of nuclear power. That was, just as amazing as it sounds. It was a week-long conference. I'm working on a program currently that's looking at the nexus between nonproliferation and climate change. And so the purpose of us attending the conference was not only to host a booth where we represented the US government and spoke to conference attendees about sort of what that nexus is and what it means for everybody and why we should all be thinking about it. But we also went there to learn more about the issues that are relevant to climate change and nuclear power and where other stakeholders sat when it came to those issues so that we could move forward with our own work. And so that's just sort of a taste of the work that you can do as a fellow. I'm sure most of you are very interested in travel opportunities, and they definitely do come up. I've traveled extensively for a variety of reasons. I've attended a few conferences, I've attended a few workshops, we've hosted a few workshops, and we've also traveled for meetings and things like that. So there's really no shortage of things that you can do. I'm happy to touch on more things depending on what people are interested in, but that's sort of just a sliver of what I've been up to for the last 8 months or so.
Any questions for Jordan? No, I have some, Jordan. What when you are doing these conferences, are you actually doing presentations at these conferences that you're attending? And when you said you're like setting them up, are you actually doing like the nitty gritty? What's the work that you're actually doing on those?
Yes, so a lot of our work means that we coordinate with national laboratories, and the national labs generally are the ones who do sort of the presentations and do the nitty-gritty technical papers that we submit to these things. But our job at HQ is to help organize these events. And so we helped organize the USG booth for the IAEA conference. We just hosted a workshop at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and our job was to coordinate that effort and draft the agenda and invite the participants and get that moving. And also just generally, what is it we want to accomplish from something like this? And then we're going to get a readout in a month or two that we'll submit to leadership, and we'll kind of further those discussions along the chain and figure out how we want to implement the results from that in our policy work that we do day to day.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again virtually, Jordan. I guess, could you talk more about the career development opportunities and events? And then also I can see on the website that fellows are given $10,000 for travel and training. Could you talk about what opportunities fall under that umbrella?
If I can, you led us to, right to the probably next couple slides. This is, and we'll answer your question in just a second. This shows a breakdown of where our fellows are going after the program, right? So you can see 44% are going straight to NNSA, another 40%, so that's 84% sort of within the nuclear enterprise, and then add on another 8%. So that's, if my math is right, 92% are sort of going on into the national security sector. So successful program, but also this, I think, to you, shows you sort of where this fellowship lines you up to go, should you wish to go there. And then this, I think, is directly your question. Let me just kind of buzz around this, and then we'll hone in on that travel and training stipend. So the fellowship is, as I mentioned, a salaried position, so 66.2 for masters and postmasters, 77.8 for postdoc. There's a hiring incentive of $4,000. That's before tax. After tax, you can count on having about half of that. And then there's this $10,000 travel and training stipend. And so that, I think your question was, what's eligible for that, what activities or that for. Jordan, I'll let you, once you probably have a wider knowledge of sort of things that your fellows have done.
Yeah, so part of it is it's very dependent on the office that you're in and the kind of work that you're doing, and also just generally what comes up during your fellowship. At least from where I am sitting in DNN, the work can be very unpredictable. Sort of every day looks different. I find that one of the coolest aspects of the fellowship and just working at NNSA in general. But that means, sometimes you don't see a trip coming until it's like 2 weeks out and somebody says, hey, we would like if you could go to this, or maybe alternatively, that you may or may not have interest in going to an event, and you can ask your office directors well ahead of time. It's very dependent on sort of what opportunities come up, what programs you're working on. I will say a lot of people, especially in DNN, I can't speak to DP because I haven't worked there, but in DNN, they're very, very willing to take you to places and give you those opportunities that you need, especially if it's been several months of your fellowship and maybe you haven't had the opportunity to travel yet. I know a lot of fellows, if they hadn't traveled by like November timeframe, they started asking around, maybe outside of the direct programs they were working with, and they usually found opportunities. There's also a couple seminars that NNSA hosts every year that are done at the labs where you can learn more about like the fuel cycle and, missiles, and it really depends on what you're interested in, but those are opportunities for travel that are totally outside of your office work that most office directors have zero issues with you going to, as long as it doesn't conflict with your day-to-day work. So really the opportunities are endless. It just depends on what comes up while you're there. There's also a lot of international conferences and domestic conferences that come up frequently that your office may want to send you to because they don't have maybe the bandwidth to go, but they want to know what's being said at those things, so they could send you, or they could send you with somebody else. Like, really, there's lots of opportunity, and that 10K gives you a lot of freedom and bandwidth to take those on as they come.
That answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I mentioned that if you're accepted as a fellow, that you're basically onboarding as a PNNL employee. So you have the same benefits I have, and that means you begin accruing vacation at a rate of 3 weeks per year. Means obviously you don't have 3 weeks right when you start, but you begin accruing that, right? Plus, are we doing 7 and 3? So I think there's 7 federal holidays that are observed, and then you have 3 floating that you can take whenever. There's an opportunity for tuition reimbursement. You be careful somewhat on that. The large print giveth, the small print taketh away. But there is but if you are enrolled in coursework during fellowship, there's a possibility to get tuition reimbursement. There's a wide variety of insurance that's available to you, including medical, dental. You can see there the list. And there PNNL does have paid sick leave, which is a nice benefit. Any questions about this chart, about the benefits? This is the plus side. So here's how to apply, maybe.
Could you actually explain times when fellows have tapped into that tuition reimbursement and how that's different than the travel and training?
So and I will even defer here maybe to Taylor, but is the tuition reimbursement is a PNNL program, and it is so it's part of your basically employment package, right? And it comes with certain strings attached, right? That's basically all tuition reimbursement does, right? And one of those is continued employment and that sort of thing. Taylor, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I am more than happy to hop in on this one. Yeah, so P&L has a great tuition reimbursement program. It's like it says, up to $13,000 annually. Since the fellowship goes from June to June across 2 calendar years, that means our fellows are actually eligible for up to $26,000 of tuition reimbursement payment. You do have to be currently enrolled. If you've already graduated, they're not going to pay you for the classes that you took before you were in the fellowship. But there are people that really find it valuable when they're in the later part of their degree. Maybe they're taking, one online class or taking credits for, maybe the fellowship is, credits for an internship for their program to graduate. And that's when that tuition reimbursement really comes in to help. It can't be used for certificates. That's the $10,000 travel and training. It does have to be for a degree seeking program. Another option is, maybe people start a second degree and they will do that part-time while they're in the fellowship, and this tuition reimbursement applies to that. I do want to stress, the fellowship is a 40-hour-a-week position. It can involve travel, as Jordan has mentioned. So, you really need to consider the pros and cons for yourself of whether or not you want to be doing school and the fellowship. I think last year, about 40% of our fellows actually did use tuition reimbursement and were still in school. So, it works for some people, it doesn't work for others. And it is actually one of 2 programs at P&L that does not require employment at P&L for 2 years after payout. So the fellowship has a special exception because many of the fellows go on to work in the same mission space that P&L supports. So once your fellowship ends, you do not have to pay that tuition reimbursement back. You can go on to any other position that you'd like.
So less small print.
Less small print than other positions at P&L, which have a lot more.
Okay, awesome. Any more questions about that? Okay. So here's the application process. So you need to be either enrolled in a graduate program or have completed it within 18 months of the application date, which is going to be October 4th. There is a GPA requirement, which you can see there, and there's a U.S. citizenship requirement. That's because you will need to be processed for a security clearance. And so you need to be a U.S. citizen to do that. And you can see there's also a little asterisk there about getting a security clearance. And here are sort of the key dates. So the applications open, is that August 1st, Taylor? August 1st. And the deadline is October 4th, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. local, very specific. What you need for your application is basically your transcript, a resume with 2 references, and a statement of interest. In that statement of interest, you want to sort of focus on sort of where you are, where you think you're headed, and how you think that would apply to this program. Any questions about that? Any questions about anything, actually, at this point?
Actually, for the references, would it be better to have 1 academic and 1 professional, or should you try to stick to 2 professional?
I would say fine for mixed. Jordan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's fine for mix. If you've been out of school for, if you're not going like straight from school into the fellowship, it might be better to have some professional references. I think I submitted 2 professional references and I found that was a good system. But if you only have like 1 professional and then you do an academic, I don't think that's going to count against you in any way.
Okay,
Taylor,
great.
do you have is there a this school book answer on this one?
You're on mute.
You're muted.
I clicked just on the wrong spot on my screen. Thank you. Not a professional answer, but I will say there are 70 fellowship positions, and each of those positions has a different hiring team that may be contacting your references. So I don't necessarily know that there is a blanket statement that will cover all of those hiring teams.
Yeah.
The people that know you and can speak to you as a person, that's who you want to list.
Any other questions?
Clara had a question earlier on career development that I can answer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I think there's kind of 2 veins for career development in the fellowship, right? There's the actual just doing your job day to day, which will really help you with your career. At least my experience, I was treated as a full employee from day one. This is not treated like an internship. You are a full employee. And so just the development that I got from being a full employee, working in this sector, and being given the responsibility of a full employee, I mean, for me, even if I didn't have any other career development opportunities, would have been insanely helpful. But there are also a lot of other opportunities, like there are courses that you can take. There are some of the seminar series will do things that related to leadership development. There's the ALCP program under NGFP that you can do that you know, we have a couple like online seminars, and then we have an in-person part of that as well, a 2-day session in the fall, which was really helpful for career development and leadership development alike. I think there are multiple opportunities throughout the fellowship that you can always choose to take on. If you do the full ALCP program, you will also like have requirements like talking to people in your office and doing informational interviews with others. You'll have a mentor from somewhere in NNSA that's not in your office. Things like that are really helpful because you're talking to professionals every single day. I'll also say the culture in NNSA, they very obviously appreciate and respect the fellows. And so you're not going to come across somebody who doesn't want to talk to you about what they do or where you want to go or what you're interested in. Like there's endless opportunities to develop your career by, you know, figuring out what path you want to take and what work is most interesting to you and what are you good at, things like that. I mean, it's hard to speak to because there's so much, but in short, the answer is there is a lot. And I've done a lot of internships before, and none have ever prepared me as well for a career as this fellowship. And it's obviously not an internship because you are treated like a full employee the whole time. So don't let anyone tell you that this is, you know, less than a full job, because it's not. If the only difference between this and a normal full salary career is that this is a temporary position, but it's designed to get you a full-time position.
Thanks, Jordan, for that. So I guess my pitch to you would be this program really has few downsides and a lot of upsides. So if you are at all contemplating a career in government, certainly if you're contemplating a career in the nuclear enterprise somewhere, apply. I mean, that's all I can tell you is just apply. And here's some for further information. I have some bonus material just for you all folks today, first time ever. If you're looking for some summer reading and you want to impress the people that you interview with, maybe I didn't total up the total number of pages here, but most of these books are 500 pages. There are a few that are only 200 or 300. But I would say Making of the Atomic Bomb is sort of the groundwork on the history of how the bomb was made. The lectures, the Feynman lectures on physics, by the way, if you have seen Oppenheimer, the guy playing bongos, that's Feynman. Those lectures are available on CD. They're also available on YouTube, so you could actually listen to those. And of course, the American Prometheus is the book that the movie Oppenheimer is based on. So anyway, apply. Interesting stuff.
Warren, we did just get a question in on wanting to know if this gives you NCE, non-competitive eligibility into the federal government.
Taylor, can you answer that?
I'm so sorry, I didn't catch the first half of the question.
Whether or not the fellowship gives you NCE into the federal government.
Jordan, help me out here. NCE, is that an acronym that I don't know yet?
That's okay, non-competitive eligibility.
Oh, okay, I've heard it referred to other things. Jordan, I'm gonna punt that one over to you since you went through the federal hiring process.
See, I actually didn't. I am a contractor.
Oh, that's true.
I don't.
So yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
As fellows, you are being considered by NNSA, I should say with NNSA. So within NNSA HR as a fellow, through all of the hiring seminars that we do, one of the things that happens is your resumes go out to NNSA HR and then to the hiring managers as a whole within the organization. And you are considered for positions. You are potentially given an offer for a position. We cannot guarantee it. And it is a non-competitive position. There is no one else applying for that. Outside of the NNSA organization, not so much.
And then I will also add, I know that when people think about working for the federal government, they think about becoming a Fed. A lot of NNSA is contractors. And there are a lot of benefits to being a contractor. There are also a lot of benefits to being a Fed. You know, it's really dependent on personal circumstances and where you want to be and what you want to do. I personally have been hired to be a contractor in my office, so I'm staying on, and I am technically moving to contractor status next week, but my day-to-day job does not change. And so it's don't be like I guess narrow-minded and like only want a Fed offer, because there are lots of opportunities and ways to get into the federal government by, you know, maybe being a contractor for a few years and then going the Fed route. You know, keep in mind there are very few Fed slots when it comes to the federal government. So getting a Fed slot is difficult, but there are other ways in. It's not a, you know, if you don't get a Fed slot right away, you've lost all hope kind of situation. So just keep in mind that contractors exist. They make up a majority of workers in NNSA, and they do the exact same work. They're not treated any differently. That's not always the same across other agencies, but NNSA, I can confirm, day to day is exactly the same as everybody else in that office.
Yep, I'd like to add to that a little bit. One of the things that we do for our fellows is the career fair. So in all of these hiring events, as I mentioned, you know, federal resumes go out to NNSA HR as an opportunity to hire fellows into the organization. About a month after that, we host our career fair, where we had this year about 25 organizations from across the national security enterprise as a whole. And you will meet other government organizations there that come and want to talk to the fellows. The title NNSA Graduate Fellow is taken pretty seriously, and I'm not going to say that just because I work for the fellowship. Everyone wants to talk to you, and people are interested in hiring.
That
We
is
also got-
genuinely true.
We also got a question that came in, wanting to know about, do you like working here?
You know, I actually do. It's, you know, the federal government, I don't say that like I'm surprised. Like, obviously, I want to be in this space, but the federal government can be sometimes a very stressful place to work. It can be really hard to get in. And then some people often feel like I can't ever leave because it's really hard to get in, right? So why would I leave and then struggle to come back? But I have genuinely enjoyed my time here so much. I love nuclear policy. This is my field. This, I've known for a while that this is where I wanted to be. So to finally have a position that speaks to that, and I get to do this work every single day, is a privilege. Like I said, the other best aspect about this job is it's different every single day. I mean, that's sort of common across government jobs, depending on where you are and what you do. But, you know, especially in the nuclear policy, like, there, you see the news every single day. Things are changing every single day, and we have to react to it every day. And so our job looks different all the time. It's often fast paced. For me, that's great. I would get very bored if I was in a job that was very slow paced. That's part of the reason why I'm in the policy world. I think the only downside, because, you know, we got to be realistic here, is sometimes that can be overwhelming, the pace of the work. It's not always a problem depending on where you are in NNSA. You know, there are some areas that are less touched by that. Being in policy like I am, every day is really dependent on who's asking us for what. I help manage an inbox that does all of our interagency requests. And so I am the kind of sole executor of, we got a request from Congress, we got a request from NSC, they request a turnaround in 2 hours. Like, I have to figure out how we're going to respond to that. That can be stressful sometimes. It's also very exciting. So it depends on the work you're doing, depends on the office you're in. But yes, I truly love my job. I would not have signed on to be a contractor, and I would not leave the fellowship early if I did not want to be here so badly. So yes, I do really love the work that I do every day.
Could I ask another question? So I've spoken with some people who were applying for NNSA, and they talked about this like limbo period whenever you're getting interviews, and how that can be stressful and confusing whenever you have interviews with several different people. Could you talk more about that process and people's experiences and what that looks like as an applicant?
You mean when you're applying for the fellowship, right?
Correct.
Okay, I can speak to my experience, and then Warren or Taylor, if you want to jump in. Yes, so I found it a very straightforward process. I mean, there is a little bit of limbo in that when you submit your application, obviously there needs to be time to review those. What happens is you submit to a big pool, and then offices go in and take a look at the applicants' resumes and cover letters, and they say, hey, I'm interested in this person, I'm interested in this person. And then from there, they'll decide who they want to interview. And so there's obviously a little bit of a limbo period there when you're waiting to hear back if an office wants to interview you. But it wasn't that long for me, and it was not unreasonable compared to other agencies in DC. I think it was like maybe a month before I got an email saying like, hey, these offices want to interview you. Taylor might be able to speak better to this. From my understanding, right, there's sort of an initial round where, you know, people will decide if they want to interview you, and then if they start going through the interview process and they aren't a fan of the applicants and they want to interview more people, then they can come back around and interview other people, like other fellows who still have not decided where they want to be. And I think that those go through January, maybe even February, depending on, you know, circumstances. But I didn't think that it was overly complicated. I was asked to interview with 2 different offices. The interviews were within like a week or 2 of each other. And then I think I waited like another month or 2 to hear back, but it was all actually not even that long. It was maybe a month to hear back. I heard back before Christmas, which is not the same for all fellows. Some fellows, you know, had their interviews post Christmas, but I knew by December, you know, that I could have a position, and I chose to take it. I don't know if Taylor, you have
Jordan, you
something.
answered most of that question.
Okay.
So if you've seen this fellowship before, we actually used to open the application in March. And I think those are the people that maybe don't hear for a long time, is you get so excited, you apply right out the gate March 1, and then the application closes October. Resumes aren't reviewed until after the application closes. So that can be a potential big waiting time there where you're wondering what happened to your application. And that's because we wait until they're all submitted, and then we send them to the hiring teams for those 70 offices. So that's how you also get multiple interviews. If there are more than one office that is interested, they will request to have an interview with you. So we have fellows that have up to 8 interviews. The first round of offers does go out in December, like Jordan mentioned, and our goal is to fill every single position in December. Now, of course, we can make offers and people can say no. We can, you know, maybe there were offices that weren't a huge fan of the people that they interviewed. So after the holidays, we go and do that second round. Our goal is to give as many people the opportunity to the fellowship and fill as many positions as possible. So sometimes there are a couple positions that don't get filled until late February. We do stop after February. Our goal is to get everyone in December, partially for that security clearance process. Clearance investigations can take an undetermined, but oftentimes lengthy amount of time. So if we can get an offer out in December and you accept it then, that means we have a 2-month head start on the clearance investigation process.
Taylor, I've had folks ask before, if they will they eventually hear if they don't get any offers for interview, will they get some sort of feedback?
They will hear that they were not selected for the position, and that communication does go out a little bit later, and because, you know, we don't want to send it in December and then have an office come back and say, actually, we'd like to interview this person. So it's after all of the interviews are complete, that's when that communication goes out.
Thank you.
I will also add, for reference, since the people on this call are probably also considering something like the PMF process. I went through the PMF process, and this is much easier and more straightforward, and you're sitting in limbo less, if that helps to have some sort of comparison.
So looks like we still have another question coming in. Cameron, guess we're going a little long. Cameron?
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess
Okay.
for all 3 of you guys, of your day-to-day responsibilities, what do you enjoy doing the most?
Okay, so I have 3 main jobs. As I said, I run the inbox for our office, so that's called being an action officer. And so sometimes that takes up 10% of my day, sometimes it takes up 90% of my day. It really depends on what interagency requests we have coming through, and which ones are short turns and things like that. Then I also run 2 different programs. So the first is the Non-Proliferation and Climate Change program, which I mentioned earlier. That's a brand new program. So a lot of our work is just figuring out what, you know, where do we want to fit? What message do we want to bring? What work do we want to do? How do we contribute to what's already being done at this nexus? And then I also work on the policy analysis and innovation program in my office, which is very forward-looking, sort of looking for emerging threats. What do we need to be watching that is going to affect the non-proliferation space? So think things like AI, space technologies, things like that. And I think day to day, you know, I think some of the coolest aspects of my job are looking at some of these new issues and figuring out how they fit into the non-proliferation policy space and what we need to be concerned about. You know, with climate change, the nexus isn't very clear always, but if you think about it a little bit more and you understand, you know, climate change means we're going to be expanding nuclear energy. That obviously has implications for the non-pro regime, because we do things like export control. If export controls suddenly are, you know, strained heavily because we have, 50 reactors that need to be approved, whereas before maybe we got a few requests a year. That's going to look very different moving forward. How do we prepare our non-pro regime to handle the strain that that's going to have on our community and our work? And so I think finding those issue areas that touch on what we do every day and preparing others for it is one of the most interesting aspects of what I do day to day.
And I technically don't work for NNSA, right? I work for PNNL. But in addition to administering this recruiting for graduate fellowship program, we do, and PNNL does do projects for NNSA, and I have worked on a couple of those projects. So for example, I mentioned that World War II era infrastructure, right? Well, some of that infrastructure is deteriorating, shall we say. So there's a place in Oak Ridge where we have traditionally done lithium work, where literally chunks of concrete are falling out of the ceiling. And so NNSA asked us to take a look at, are there, now with all these electrical vehicle manufacturers and so forth, there's a lot of lithium work being done in the commercial space. So NNSA asked us to take a look at what types of work were being done by what commercial entities, and might any of this be applicable? So instead of trying to build, a $500 million plant, could we leverage the commercial industry to replace that for some of the work that NNSA needs to do? And that's interesting and exciting and worthwhile work.
I think I'm gonna just double check the chat. I think we are good. I want to thank you all. This was absolutely tremendous. Every time I hear this, I learn more. So I want to thank all of you for sharing, and all the students